On today's show, what to expect from Pierre-Luc Dubois in the 2025-2026 season next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals leaning into the youth more than we've seen, well, in quite some time. And one of those key players, Ryan Leonard, is looking to impress as he is going to be playing in the NHLPA Rookie Showcase. What to expect there? A bit later, the numbers on Matt Roy. A big addition a couple summers ago. We know the Capitals acquired him from the Kings, and some good and some bad. I'll dive into both of those, but just to get it going here, what to expect from Pierre-Luc Dubois in the 25-26 season, and is this the new Pierre-Luc Dubois, or is his history, is what we've seen from him in years before, is that going to come back? Or is, like I say, is he a changed man? Let's dive into that in segment number 1 here. And just a quick history lesson, if you don't remember, is that a couple summers ago, Brian McClellan said that he was going to make some big moves. And the big move right out of the gate was Pierre-Luc Dubois, who signed that 8-year deal with the Kings. As it turns out, the Kings were looking for goaltending. And, well, they had Darcy Kemper, who was a bit of a square peg in a round hole for the Capitals in the net minding department. And the Capitals, well, they were looking for a center. So that is how the trade took place with the Kings. But the hard part about all of it was that 8-year deal with the Kings. And wow, that is a big bite out of that apple of Pierre-Luc Dubois. We better hope this works out, because the word out there was that this guy was a cancer in the locker room, that he mailed it in. And didn't you take a look at his stats from last season, Dan? So let's dive into that. What to expect from Pierre-Luc Dubois? Is he a changed man with the new systems, the new coaching? It'll be an interesting conversation. Let's dive into it here in segment number 1. And like I say, when he came to the Capitals, it was met with a lot of questions. What Pierre-Luc Dubois were we going to see? Was it going to be the guy from Columbus, or was it going to be the guy that we had seen from the year before with the Kings? Turns out, if you take a look at it, it does appear in that 1-year snapshot that we got the guy from Columbus, and actually better, if you can believe it, a career high 66 points. That is quite an about face from what we had seen from him in the year before. 66 points in his first season with the Caps, 40 before that. And a guy that really dazzled, I guess I'm going to say, in the regular season, in his first season with the Capitals, playing on that second line center. Like I said, when he first came here, I didn't know if he was going to be playing on the first line with Alex Ovechkin, but it wasn't all rosy and smooth sailing for Pierre-Luc Dubois, because a lot like other Capitals players, he failed to impress or show up in a lot of ways in the playoffs. In 10 playoff games for the Capitals last season, 0 goals and 3 assists. So a far cry from what we had seen from him during the regular season. But the thing about Pierre-Luc Dubois, if we're going to just kind of put the playoffs to the side right now, because I think it's more important in a lot of ways to judge him based on what we saw during the regular season, is that he played with confidence and he played with purpose. And honestly, he looked like he was having fun. And, it's one of those things like, well, it's your job. It shouldn't be about having fun. I think if you're going to be a successful athlete at a professional level, you better have fun doing it. And that's a big deal for Pierre-Luc Dubois, because the year before in LA, it just never looked like he found his spot. But like a lot of other Capitals players, it looks like that he found the right fit in Washington with Spencer Carbery as the head coach. And why is that? He gave the freedom to Pierre-Luc Dubois to just go out there and play your game. He said, just play your game. Don't think about it too much. And it's confidence, like I've talked about, that we've seen players like that struggle before, where I think he was feeling kind of defeated playing on the Kings in the previous season. But we've seen that before with Mantha having a down season, then finding his confidence, and even Alex Ovechkin. So that is the big thing there. But the thing of it is, like I say, in a vacuum, was last year a one-off? Or can we continue to see a successful Pierre-Luc Dubois? Because he signed to an $8.5 million contract through 2031. That's a big commitment. And, it's hard to say. I guess we can get a more accurate reading on what we see from him next season, because, you could view one season as a one-off, but to put up career numbers, I think that's a bit more telling. Because if this is the guy that we're getting, that is a cornerstone piece for the next era of Capitals hockey. Think post-Ovechkin hockey, that they're going to need leaders on this team to step up when Ovi steps aside. And, don't forget also about Pierre-Luc Dubois, talking about Alex Ovechkin transitioning here. He was a big part of one of the biggest moments in franchise history. Alex Ovechkin breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. It's got to be quite refreshing to go from the Kings to the Capitals and just totally embrace the whole goal chase by Alex Ovechkin. And if you remember that goal, Ovi scores, the place goes nuts, and then he belly flops on the ice like it's, summer vacation. And it's an interesting story there to talk about. That is that it wasn't exactly what was planned. Turns out it was more of an accident, if you will. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, he confirmed that in an article with TVA Sports. He said he didn't plan on doing that. He just tripped because, the ice was poor in the game that they were playing. But now it's a part of that, iconic celebration. In a lot of ways, it was very fitting because, when you saw it happen, it didn't look like it was an accident. It just looked like I finally did it, and just, it didn't look like it was an accident, even though we find out after the fact that's what it is. That's peak Ovi right there. So now Ovi sitting at 897, 3 away from 900. And Caps fans, how fun is next season going to be? If this is, very well could be Alex Ovechkin's last season, and Pierre-Luc Dubois playing, a big role with the Capitals on that second line center, it could be huge. Talking about Ovechkin, though, does he hit 50 goals again? We saw what he put up last season. Does he push? Does he just keep moving the goalpost further and further and further? The one thing I know, if this is in fact the last season of Alex Ovechkin in the NHL, it is going to be must-watch TV. Every night when the Capitals are playing, you're going to want to watch it, because it very well could be the last hurrah of Ovi. But, as far as Pierre-Luc Dubois is concerned, to be a part of such a monumental moment, that Alex Ovechkin was able to finally break the record, the unthinkable thing, to break Wayne Gretzky's record, the great one. Who was going to touch that? And for Pierre-Luc Dubois to be involved in that in such a great moment is huge. Again, to kind of circle back here, we're hoping that Pierre-Luc Dubois has another breakout season to just really screw down and nail down that second line center position, because we know Stromer's holding it down on the first line. And I think that the Capitals will take the Metro. I think they'll take the Eastern Conference by storm. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Ryan Leonard and the Rookie Showcase. Straight ahead. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in on live action as it unfolds. It makes every game more exciting. So whether you're watching the Commanders or the Ravens, it makes it that much more exciting. So it's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays if you don't need it already. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by using FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about future pieces, future building blocks, like I talked about in the first segment with Pierre-Luc Dubois being one of those building blocks of the future. In that very same breath, you could put Ryan Leonard, and he is gearing up for the NHLPA Rookie Showcase to show what he has in the tank yet again. And what did we see from Ryan Leonard last year? Knocked it out of the park with Boston College, right? And joined the Capitals in the latter part of the season there. And, he tried to integrate. It is jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, the NCAA to the NHL. We're hoping to see more. But what is next for Mr. Ryan Leonard? Let's dive into that in the second segment of the show. Because like I say, if there's a player you want to pay attention to in the future, it's got to be Ryan Leonard. He's going to be playing at the NHLPA Rookie Showcase at MedStar next month. And listen, this event isn't just for fun. This is where the league brings in the guys they believe are the future. And I think it's a fairly safe thing to say that Ryan Leonard fixes to be a big part of the Capitals' future. And like I say, they don't just invite anybody. So Ryan Leonard being there, that is a big deal. And, if you didn't know, in my opinion, the kid is the real deal. And he got just a taste of the NHL action last season in 17 games. And in those 17 games, you saw flashes of greatness. I think the tip of the iceberg of what we can expect to see from him in the future, because he has the skills in his skill set. He's got that NHL level shot. He's got the compete level, and he's got the physicality that this team needs. And like I've talked about, if you're an everydayer on the show, I talked about how I think he's cut from kind of the same mold as Tom Wilson. But if you look at his trajectory, in a lot of ways, I think he's actually going to be a better player than Tom Wilson at some point. And this isn't a guy who's going to shy away from contact, and kind of a prototypical Capital, like I've talked about, kind of dubbed a lot of Capitals players, is physical, tall, and ready to bring, their A game, and not afraid of finishing their checks, and not afraid, if you're pushing the team around, to drop the mitts and take care of business. And, he's the guy that's not afraid of doing whatever it takes to get the job done, playing play in the dirty areas. He wants to win those board battles, and in the playoffs, that's huge. And I have no doubt the Capitals will make it to the playoffs again next season. And with a complete NHL season under his belt, I think that we're going to just see this team even do better than we've seen last season. I always do like the point counterpoint. And I talked about, do I think the Capitals will take a step back? A lot of it is going to be determined on the youth. And if Ryan Leonard can take a step forward, like I think he can, that could be huge. But the big question, is there's going to be fights out there as far as roster spots are concerned. We're talking Crystal, Miro, Sonny Milano, Hendrix Lapierre. Is where does a guy like Ryan Leonard slot in? Do you start him on the third line and kind of give him more limited minutes, or do you try and shake it up and put him in like more of a top six role? But the thing I know is that if it clicks early in the season when he's playing on the top six, he's not going to relinquish that. I think that if you get a taste that he is the real deal, the very reason why the Capitals drafted him where they did, he is going to be a game changer for the Capitals. If you're asking for my early take, I think that in some of the preseason, we will get a look at him in some top 6 minutes and top six roles to see how he clicks. Say it's with Ovi and Strome, or if it's, Connor McMichael and Pierre-Luc Dubois, or whatever the case might be, you're going to see increased minutes. And I think that we're going to really see his career, in the NHL start to take shape. And don't be surprised if you see him on the power play as well. As special teams is something, I think for the Capitals that needs some work, maybe not right away, but maybe PP2 by midseason if you want to set a goal for him. I could definitely see that. Like I said, he's got the skills in his skill set. This isn't a lower draft pick. There was high hopes for Ryan Leonard. And, like I said, he's got that shot. He's got the hockey IQ. He's got the instincts to take his game to the next level. And that on the man advantage could be huge. And the other thing about him, like I talked about, leadership, is he has that intrinsically as a leader, and the Capitals are going to look for leaders in the vacuum if, in fact, Alex Ovechkin, that is his final season. And everyone who knows him says that he is a guy who plays with swagger. Some people might misconstrue that as cockiness. And hey, if he's cocky, if he can put up the numbers, you let him go out there and put his swagger on and be as cocky as he wants to be. If the results back up the swag, then I'm all about it. Because he's confident and he wants the puck in big moments. And, some people have said, well, we don't know what kind of Ryan Leonard we're going to see. We only saw him play at Boston College and, on the international stage. Yeah, but he knocked it out of the park. The guy's compete level is next level. So him playing at that rookie showcase, it's not just a headline, it's a sign. The future is almost here. And I'm excited. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm excited for the start of the hockey season already. The training camp is going to be here before you know it, and the roster is going to take shape. And you better believe that Ryan Leonard is going to be a huge piece of next season and the future, big picture. It'll be really fun to see what he has in the tank at the NHLPA Rookie Showcase to play against some truly elite talent. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on Ryan Leonard because I'm a Capitals fan and a podcaster for the Capitals, for Locked On Capitals. But it's not just that. I really think that he is one of the best players in the National Hockey League, and it'll be interesting to see him lined up against that kind of talent. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the numbers behind Matt Roy's success and, well, in some cases, lack thereof. Straight ahead. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like and what you don't and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you for helping us out. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you the entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people who, with busy lives, If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization on your spending, and finally, feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. The thing I like about it, I was able to see where I was spending money wisely and maybe not so wise. And if you have a significant other in your life, well, you can help plan your financial future together. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. In the final segment of today's show, we're talking about a quiet guy, all things considered, Matt Roy on the blue line, of course, a former King. And, all things considered, some good, some bad. I think that he fits into the Capitals' long-term plans just based on his contract and ultimately what we saw from him last season. So let's dive into the good and, well, some of the bad as well in the final segment of today's show. So when the Caps signed him to that deal, 6 years, $5.75 million per. That was a big move and a name that was familiar to me, but was not one of the names that was like a marquee, super sexy NHL name. Because the one thing the Capitals needed was stability on the right side. And they needed a guy who could play big minutes because, there are enough blue liners that eat up a lot of minutes, John Carlson in particular. So it's good to take some of the burden off some of the top D pairing players out there. So how did last year go? Offensively, I'm going to say pretty solid, 0.35 points per game. The best of his career, if you got to know. Highest assist rate he's ever had. And, the thing of it is, that was even after he missed 13 games. So there's definitely some positivity that surrounds him offensively. But where things aren't so good is defensively, and that is what should be important since he is a defender. And this is where we talk about GF percent and CF percent. I know those terms sound like an alphabet soup, so let's break it down a little bit here. GF percent is goals for percentage. Basically, when you're on the ice, how many goals does your team score compared to how many you give up? If you're on the ice for 10 goals for and 10 goals against, that's 50%. You want to be above 50%, of course, because that means your team is outscoring the other team when you're out there. Matt Roy's GF percent, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, not good, below 50. And what does that mean to a granular level? More specifically, that means more goals against than goals for when he was on the ice. Now, CF percent, that's Corsi for percentage. That's a measure of shot attempts. Every time your team shoots or tries to shoot, that is what they call Corsi for. Every time the other team does, that's Corsi against. So CF percent is basically about possession, you could say. Just generally speaking, do you have the puck more than the other team does when you're out there? Again, you want numbers above 50. Matt Roy's CF percent was the lowest among the 6 regular defensemen. And, that isn't maybe something that was glaringly apparent when you watch the games. I mean, at points it was, but when I looked at the numbers, I was a bit surprised. I know that, he's not necessarily known for his offensive acumen. However, he did show, steps forward in that regard. But defensively, I think we need to see a more buttoned up Matt Roy. Because when Matt Roy was on the ice, the other team had the puck more. And, well, they scored more. That's not great, especially for a guy that's making almost $6 million a year. But like everything else in life, like, why did you do that? Hey, there's more to the story. There's more to the story. I feel like that's what Matt Roy would be saying, is that there's contextual information that I think is needed in here. So some of that is who he played with. Most of the year, it was Marty Faravari, and the pair was, okay, not terrible, not elite, but, just okay. So now the big question is, being that Marty Faravari is a bit of a question mark going into next season, just based on health concerns, is do you keep them together or do you mix it up and try with someone else? Because the contract says he's going to play big minutes. The Caps need him to be more than just okay. So that's the big question. What do you guys think out there? Grade Matt Roy's offseason 1 to 10, and would you keep him with Faravari next season? It is a bit of an interesting question, and sometimes, and that's what I'm going to do here before the start of camp and all that, is kind of just, take a look at the numbers. And some of it is a bit shocking from what I found from some of the players that you thought, wow, really, really good. Yes, but there's also certain parts that are not so good. And I guess what I'm going to say is that was what was apparent for me when I looked at under the hood a bit for Matt Roy, is the offensive numbers were a step up, but defensively he has taken some steps back. So we're hoping that next season he can fix, what was wrong, that he can actually play some sound defensive minutes. And it will be interesting to see who he ends up getting paired with next season. As there are some questions on the blue line. I guess not a whole lot. I guess the biggest question, of course, is Marty Faravari. But in that same breath, does he get paired with Marty? Some interesting storylines to follow. That is for sure. All right. I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.